Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be running this session today all about discovery meetings. So just to give a bit of intro to myself, I'm Alex Gasson. I'm the CEO of a business called Delta V. And what we do as companies, we build and run outbound SDR teams. So we work with a lot of AEs and we see a lot of discovery calls that our SDRs are booking for AEs. And I think one of the big things that we've seen is that a surprising number of AEs don't follow basic good practice in how they run discovery calls. And that's what this session today is all about. So just talking a bit more about myself, I've been in sales for almost 20 years now, most of which has been spent building sales teams, whether it's teams of recruiters, teams of account execs, teams of SDRs. Currently I lead a team of 20 people, which is mostly SDRs at Delta V. And I'm still very actively involved in selling myself. So a lot of what I'm talking about or going to be talking about is going to reflect kind of practices and how I run my sales process at the moment. The focus of the talk today is really around process for running great discovery calls. And when I say process, what I'm talking about is all the things that require no talent or skill to get right, but probably get you 50% of the way to running really successful sales processes. So I know we've got a really great mix of AEs and sales leaders and also some SDRs on this call. So I'm really excited about this call because I think we've got a great mix of people in this audience. And what I would love is for there to be as much interactivity as possible. So guys, please, in the chat, ask lots of questions as we go through the content, and I will address those questions as they come up. So please, feel free to fire away. And if there's time, we can also do some Q&A at the end of this session. All right, so let's get into it. So what is a discovery meeting? So this is the AI overview from Google tells me it is an introductory conversation to understand a potential client's need, challenges, and goals before a product or service is sold. I think something else to maybe add into that you want to be thinking about is probably not just this introductory conversation, but as a salesperson, what you want to be doing at this stage of the process is figuring out very quickly is whether there's an opportunity to make you money, and if it isn't an opportunity for you to make money, kick this opportunity out of your sales process as quickly as you can. So a question I have here to maybe just start things off. This is a call the recording of a discovery call that I did a while ago, and I would like some opinions from people who are on this call if this was a good call or a bad call and why. All right, well, I'll give you guys, okay. So if you look at the, so this was using a call recording tool and it gives me a summary of my talk time. If you look down on the right here, and you can see that this is a discovery call where I spoke 70% of the time and my prospect only spoke 30% of the time. And that is pretty much exactly the opposite of how you want it to look. So the purpose of a discovery call is for you to talk probably maybe 40% of the time, and you want your prospects spending about 60% of the time talking about themselves and their problems. So fundamentally, I think you want to, if you're thinking about structuring a call, you want to make sure that you're not the one doing all the talking. Okay, so anyway, getting into the agenda for today's session. what we're going to cover is we're going to start off with a bit of theory, talking about the buyer's journey and how that relates to sales process and particularly discovery. A little bit of kind of talking about qualification and frameworks. And then we'll get into the more practical stuff, which is the process for how to run great discovery calls, particularly covering preparation, how you want to structure and run the meeting, and then follow on actions from the call. I think just to be clear as well, what I'm very much going to be covering is process, not skills or sales skills that you want to be doing in this. Like what I'm covering is like all the really simple things that are easy to get right, as opposed to saying like the higher level type of sales skills that you want to be kind of applying when you are running a sales process. Okay, so getting into the theory, this slide is one that I really like from a sales training company called the Rain Group. And what they have here is they have a sales process which is mapped to the buyer's journey. So saying what is the journey that our buyer's going through while we are trying to sell them. And this is really important in terms of trying to understand where discovery fits into, because you've got to fit what you're doing into a buyer's journey as opposed to trying to fit that buyer's journey into your sales process. And particularly, we want to understand where discovery fits into the buyer's journey. So I'm going to just skip forward to a slide which kind of just goes in a little bit more detail or zoomed in here. But when we're at the stages of a buying process where we're doing discovery, we want to be thinking about what our buyers are doing. And they are essentially, when we're talking to them at early stage of the sales process, they are in a state of dissatisfaction. And that could either be passive, where they know they have a problem, but they're not doing anything about it. And it could be that they believe there is no good solution to the problem that they have. And the other one would be where they're actively actually searching for a solution. And then within those, there's two different modes where they're actually looking to solve or fix something that's broken, or the other one could be where they're more looking to the future and thinking about things that they don't necessarily have to do because of a problem, but things that they could do, which are going to be future benefit to them. And then going from that dissatisfaction stage to actually then moving to like starting to assess and do analysis on how they could fix the problem, which is this analysis stage, which is kind of the next stage in the buyer's journey. So if we go back to that, so we can say that when we're doing discovery with someone where we're kind of understanding needs, we're generally talking to them where they're sitting somewhere in the sort of dissatisfaction and analysis stages. And I think particularly if you are generating opportunities from outbound, you're often going to be catching people where they are passively in a state of passive dissatisfaction. So they're not actively looking for a solution yet. And what that means for you as a seller is that there's a much higher onus of you in execution in order to really unlock the pain and the opportunity for you to make a sale. And this is where discovery is particularly important, where while in the world where somebody's kind of on an active buying journey and they've come inbound to you, there's less work that you potentially have to do as a seller to get a prospect across the line because they are actively looking for a solution to the problem. So moving on then, so what is our purpose of running a discovery call? So sales is very much a process. And if you put garbage into your sales process, you're going to get garbage outcomes. And so you'll spend a lot of time, if you're working deals that have a low probability of closing, you're going to spend a huge amount of time working stuff and doing lots of activity, and you're not going to be closing many deals. And so discovery and qualification is really the kind of key point of having that initial prospect for the initial key point of thing that you want to be doing in that initial call with a prospect. And really there's two things you're trying to do is you're trying to understand, is there an opportunity for me to make a sale here? And how do I get to as close to perfect information as possible so that I can steer this buyer down the journey to ultimately buying my solution versus one from my competitors. Something that I've observed is that the best salespeople are absolutely ruthless about the opportunities that they put into their sales pipeline. So when they're doing discovery, they very quickly assess whether they have an opportunity to do business. And if there's a low probability of them closing a deal, they get that deal or that opportunity the hell out of their sales pipeline, and they focus on a smaller number of high quality opportunities at a high probability of closing, rather than doing lots of activity talking to prospects on deals that are never going to close, because the base criteria for a deal being closed are not there. So digging into kind of how you go about doing this is that you, as part of your discovery process, you want to be using a qualification framework. So I would guess that most of you have heard of BANT. There are lots of other qualification frameworks out there like MEDIC or SPICed, or a bunch of others. And I think that all of them are like pretty good. In terms of selecting a qualification framework, really what you want to be doing is selecting a framework that works for your business and your sales motion. For this example here, I have example of the ANAM qualification framework, which is really just a rejigging of BANT. So BANT stands for Budget, Authority, Need, and Timeline. And ANAM is a rejigging of that, where you start off with authority. So really understanding who is your buyer and if you're talking to the right person. Then establishing whether they have the right types of problems that you can solve, what their urgency is around solving those problems, and whether they can find, whether they have budget or they can find the money to solve this problem. So the kind of example questions that are on the slide are very much generic types of questions. And if you are going to do good discovery, having questions like this is not going to be enough to be effective. What you need to be doing, and this is really the job of sales leadership in a company, is taking a qualification framework and translating that into specific questions that are relevant to your market, your buyer, and your solution, and then having a set of questions that they ask each and every time, so that you ask each and every time when you do a discovery call. But what I'll do is I'll also talk you through some slightly more kind of examples of how this would then get calibrated to a real world scenario a little bit later. So Marissa, you're asking, do we approach this differently for each client, or is this a set approach or set of questions? So the thing is, you want to have it. So I'm going to get into this a bit later, but essentially what you want to do is your baseline should be and if we're talking about process, is you have a standard set of questions. But I will get into that a little bit because I've got some examples around this shortly, and just practical examples of how you build out this process. So let's get into the practical stuff. So we're going to talk about now the actual process for how you run a great discovery meeting. And so there are kind of three key steps around a discovery meeting process. So one, before the meeting, obviously preparation and research. Two is then actually running the discovery call. And then the follow-on actions that you want to be doing after the call. And so really, like, what you want to have as part of your process is you want to have a one-pager discovery document, which is the standard questions that you ask each and every time. And like I mentioned, this is something that really, like, you should be getting sales leadership or sales enablement to have created and having trained you on. If you're an AE or if you're a sales leader, if you haven't equipped your team with something like this, you absolutely have to create it and you have to train your team on it. And like, I mean, so I'm still selling, and like, this is like a printout of a recent of my sort of discovery one-pager from a recent call that I did. It's got scribbles all over it. But essentially what I do is I have a standard set of questions, and then when I do research, I then calibrate those questions based on the research that I have. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that when I'm doing a call, I'm trying to get to as complete information as possible. So I am right at the start building some rapport. Then I'm establishing, am I talking to the right person, asking need, pain questions, asking questions around urgency, budget, money, and ultimately competition as well. So this is just so anyway. This one page is an asset that you want to have in terms of your discovery process that you leverage on each call that you're making. So then when you're actually starting the process of preparing for your call, pre-call research is an essential part of a successful call. So this is sort of a generic list of things that you can be looking at, and what you want to do, again, calibrate this to the specific ICP that you're working in terms of, what are the things that you need to look at relative to your solution and your target customer, and want to understand before a call. So just to walk you through these, obviously you're going to go look at the company website, and there are going to be certain web pages that have information that you want to look at. Something else I find to be very useful to do in many sales processes is to go and look at a company's career page and look at the open roles. You can often glean a lot about what's going on in an organization from what they're posting in their job ads, particularly looking at job ads that are kind of an irrelevant part of the organization that you are selling into. If you're selling to a listed company that has to produce annual reports, there's a lot of gold often in annual reports. So it's worth digging into the annual report and looking for specific initiatives that are going on in the business that are relevant to the solution that you're selling into that company. Also looking at news, so running searches on things like Google News to understand, are there any sort of trigger events that are going to potentially make your solution more relevant to a business at a particular point in time? So that could be things like M&A, funding, leadership changes. And then another thing you want to go and do is you're probably will be meeting with one or more people. Get onto LinkedIn, make sure you look at those people's LinkedIn profiles in depth so you understand their background. But also what you should be doing is going and actually mapping the full buying committee and identifying who are all the people in the organization who match your personas, who generally make up your buying committee, and understanding who those people are, so that you can reference them if needed in a conversation, or if you feel that you're going to need to have to pull certain stakeholders into your sales process, know who those people are, and so you can figure out a plan of how to get to them. Some of this these days now you can automate a bit with using ChatGPT or Gemini deep research. My experience has been that if you're targeting small and medium enterprises, often the information that ChatGPT Gemini is going to give you is not that great. While if you're targeting large enterprises and you want to save time, in particular digging into things like career pages where there's hundreds of jobs, or annual reports which are 100-page long documents, you can get quite a lot of value from using ChatGPT, building good prompt and then having ChatGPT or Gemini give you a summary of kind of key information about a business. Guys, just a reminder, please feel free to ask lots of questions and stop me at any point if there's anything that you want to ask about. So what you're going to be doing as well in this pre-call research is you're going to use that to figure out what are the specific questions, what are the things I want to clarify, what do I want to dig into when I'm talking to a prospect. And those are things that you're going to take and also add on to your standard sort of set of discovery questions. So when you're going into the call, you don't just have standard robotic questions that you're going to be asking. You've actually gone and you've gone and adapted those to the specific status quo of a particular account based on the research that you've done. So you've done your research and now you have your call. And this structure for a call, if you structure a call right, has a material impact on how well a call goes and the information that you get out of a prospect. Now, the first thing that you want to be doing on any discovery call is setting an agenda for the meeting, which is essentially where you take control of the meeting. So an agenda is going to sound something like along the lines of, okay, great, so great to meet you. Thanks for making the time to meet with us. Today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to understand a bit more about you and your role, understand about these challenges that you have in your company. Then I'll give you an overview of our solutions. And then from there, we can chat further about next steps in the process. Is there anything else that you would like to get out of the call today? And when you set your agenda like that, you then have taken control over the call. And depending on the persona that you're talking to, this is really critical. So I sell to a lot of founders and sales leaders. And if you do not set an agenda at the start of the call, these guys are going to dominate your call and take control of your call, and you're not going to get what you need out of it. So you really want to, it's really very, very helpful to take control of your call. And I can tell you if I do not set an agenda for a call generally does not go well. If I set an agenda, it goes really well. So after you have set your agenda, the next thing to go into is doing some initial discovery, where you're starting to get the information that you need to figure out, hey, is there an opportunity for me to do business here? And two, getting information that's going to allow you to get control of the sales process and highlight the things that you need to show to the prospect that's going to want to make them take the conversation further. So in terms of what you want to cover in the initial discovery that you're doing, first off, we want to be covering off authority. So that essentially means understanding who are you talking to, what are they responsible for, what do they look after, and that is so. And so for me personally, this trumps going into needs and challenges, because I need to understand who am I talking to before I get into the rest of the conversation. From there, we start talking about needs or challenges, and you want to start off with the easy stuff, which is basically just talking about the status quo in their business and the current situation. So that's asking questions that are really easy for them to answer. After you've covered that, you then want to go to the questions that are harder to ask or harder to get responses on, but which is where you're actually digging into the pain points that they have and that need to be solved. And then often you will also be having some conversation around kind of what's the urgency of solving these problems. This should get you probably to, if done well, should get you maybe to about, assuming it's a 45-minute call, about 20 minutes of the way through your call. And at this point, you probably want to start presenting some information or sharing information with your prospect. And so depending on your sales motion, this would either be giving them a demo of your solution or walking them through a slide deck. And part of what you want to be doing here is also sharing pricing. So for me, this is like a critical part of the process, and pricing does not necessarily have to be specific. It could be that you are, depending if you're talking about a long, complex sales cycle, probably going to be sharing ballpark indicative numbers. While if you're selling a more commoditized solution or packaged solution, you can be very specific about pricing. The reason why you want to share pricing at this stage is because you want to give prospects the opportunity to qualify themselves out by saying, no, you are too expensive. And if they do that, that is a good outcome, because you have not wasted your time going down a whole sales process and getting to proposal, and then the deal only falling over there because you are too expensive. So this is a really important qualifier, and it links to really kind of, when you're doing deeper discovery, establishing whether they have the money or can find the money to use your solutions. So after you've presented information, then what often happens in terms of the way the call runs is you will find that now that they've shared some information, you've shared information, you're actually going to get into much meatier discovery, and you've built some trust with the prospect. And this is where you want to kind of start covering off, kind of talking about money and budgets, understanding decision-making process, digging into urgency, uncovering, is there a critical event that is compelling them to buy? So like that is essentially saying, like, if you don't change anything, if you don't do anything, what happens? And if there are no negative consequences to them not doing anything, you probably don't have a deal. And then also understanding who you're competing with. And then the last step of the process is, before you leave the call, agree and book in next steps, which is to maintain process control. And this is critical to running a good sales process. So if you want to transform your sales, if you don't do these two things at the moment and you want to transform your sales process, just do these two things on discovery calls. One, set an agenda at the start of the meeting, and at the end of the meeting, always agree on and book in next steps. Do not say you're going to send an email and confirm times over email. So in terms of your sales process, you should always understand, have a clear next step, what you do after discovery. It could be that there's a deeper demo, or it could be that there's a scoping session or something like that that you need to run. Prospect might not always be ready for that. They might want to go and have a conversation internally before they commit to another half hour, 45 minutes or hour of their time. But do not leave the call without at least having a 15-minute check-in scheduled and time agreed to for where you can catch up and see where they are in terms of those internal discussions. The great thing about doing that is that you then know exactly where you are in your process. So your prospect turns up to that next meeting, fantastic. Your process is moving along as you want it to. If they cancel the call, or then you also know exactly where they are, because they're essentially saying to you that they are not interested. So it's critical for kind of maintaining process control and actually keeping your pipeline clean as well. All right, so this is how you want to structure and run your discovery call. It's super simple, but if you follow this process, you will find that you have, and you're not doing it at the moment, you will find that you have materially better conversations, and you have much better control over your deal process. Post-meeting, what you then want to be doing is you want to be going through a process of actually making time to review your meeting and make notes. So to do this, one of the things you should be doing is that if you're doing calls online, you should always be recording those calls so that you can review them. So AI note takers are also super useful for this. So in terms of getting a recording and then also getting a transcript, which is much quicker than going and rewatching your whole video. But in terms of the process of like reviewing a meeting, you want to go through a process of making notes to make sure that you've collected the information that you need to move a process forward. And so on a generic level, things you want to understand is like, what are the roles of the people you spoke to? What type of role do they perform in the buying process? Are they economic buyer, decision maker, champion? Have you got a good understanding of their current situation? Do you understand the specific pain points that they're trying to solve? Urgency, do you know the critical event that's actually forcing them to buy something? What's the timeline for actually having to do something? In terms of decision making, do you know what the decision making process looks like? Do you know what their evaluation criteria are for how they're going to select a vendor? Who else do they need to involve in that process that you have not met yet? Money, are they willing to pay? Can they find the money? Competition, you want to understand who else are they looking at, and that competition could also be not necessarily just your direct competitors, but competing alternatives. So that could be things like use Excel, hire an intern, build internally. So those are things that you also want to understand. What are the other options they're looking at, so you can draft a competitive strategy versus those options. You also want to keep yourself accountable. Make sure that you have been booking in next steps. And lastly, this is something that's very useful to do when you're making these notes, is to look at all of your notes and figure out what did you miss, or what info do you still need to collect. And this is totally fine if there's a big list of things that you still need to get, because Discovery doesn't necessarily happen on a single call. It can happen over multiple calls with a customer. But what you want to do is you want to get to the point where you have complete information and you have full kind of deal control, because you understand all the dynamics affecting this deal. So tracking like what you still need to collect is super useful for when you're going into subsequent calls. And then the place that you should be storing all of this information is in your CRM, either as notes attached to the opportunity, or your sales operations team should be setting up the fields in an opportunity so that you are compelled to kind of capture this information in the deal before it can move forward to the next stage of the process. And then lastly, after you've reviewed your meeting, you also want to kind of send a follow-up email to your prospect, which is really kind of summarizing the discussion that you had. This is a framework that I really like in terms of these headings and bullets, where you're playing back what's not working for the customer or the prospect, what they're looking for, how you can help them, and the agreed next steps that you have. Where you can also use this to map out the process that you're going to take them through to get to the point where they receive a proposal from you and ultimately sign on with you. So this would be the last step in the process, and then obviously you continue on with the process. But really, discovery and qualification, this is the most critically important part of your sales process, because ultimately what you want to be doing is you want to have a very process and robust way of, one, figuring out if you have a great opportunity to do business and make a sale, and if not, you kick it out of your pipeline. And if you do have a good opportunity, you want to make sure that you have great information about that deal and the dynamics of the deal so that you can take it through to successful close. All right, so that actually covers the full presentation that I had. So as I mentioned, the focus is very much on process, and this is a process to take back and apply in how you do things. There will be subsequent webinars where I'm then covering more the skills that you want to be applying in the process. But this is really focused on like the real basics, like the things that require no skill, and give you a great framework for how to manage calls. Or if you are a sales leader and you are wanting to coach and train your team, having a framework like this allows you to be much more effective in coaching people, because the starting point of coaching people is to coach them not in the sales skills, but coach them on process. Ensure that they initially are adhering to process, which is really quick and easy to do. And then from there, you make sure that they are applying the skills that they need, which are harder to do. The skills are like the process, all the things that require no skill. And then the skills are things that I think of like playing a sport, where you just need to have a certain number of reps to really start doing a good job. So Marissa, your question, which part of the call do you see people struggle the most with, and how do you advise them to improve? So I think that people are very scared of conversations around money and pricing, and they make a big deal about it. The trick around conversations around when you're talking price, money, be as nonchalant, as matter of fact about it as possible. Like, don't make a big deal about it. If you make a big deal about it, it's going to become a big deal for your prospect. If you just act in a way where this is how it is, this is what everybody pays, this is totally reasonable, it totally changes the tone of the conversation around money. So don't have a big build up to talking about money, and don't be scared about talking about pricing. One of the tricks, and this is more like on the skill side of things, but after you've taken somebody through prices, just pause and shut up and stay quiet for a few seconds and wait to hear what they say, rather than like feeling that you have to fill the silence and start kind of justifying your pricing. Cool. So that covers all the content that I have today. If anybody has any other questions, please fire away. I will stay on here for another minute or two. So please, yeah, don't be shy. Please fire away and ask lots of questions. All right, it looks like no questions. Hopefully this was useful, guys. And yeah, hopefully there's stuff in here that you can go and take and apply into your own sales processes.